After the Bronze Age collapse, Greece did not disappear, but the world that had shaped it was broken. There were no great kings, no towering palaces, no writing. Memory survived, but the world that created it did not. Its palaces burned, its cities abandoned. For centuries, Greece existed in fragments, small villages scattered across the land, isolated lives, stories passed from voice to voice. What comes next is not a return, but a reconstruction. The rebuilding of a world through order, proportion, and the human form. And for the first time, that reconstruction becomes visible, not through conquest, not through empire, but through order. This is the Greek answer to chaos. The rebuilding of a world through order, proportion, and the human form. Around 900 BCE, Greece begins to recover. We don't know exactly why, but something shifts. Population grows, trade expands, connections return. Iron tools spread, agriculture improves, and for the first time in centuries, communities begin to stabilize. As populations grow, life becomes more complex, skills develop, roles emerge, and society begins to take shape. And with that, a new kind of life emerges. People gather into communities. Communities become polis, independent city-states. And for the first time in centuries, Greece begins to see itself again. What follows is the first phase of Greek art, a period of rebuilding that will eventually lead to the classical world. Around 800 BCE, something remarkable happens. Writing returns. Adapted from the Phoenicians, traders of the Eastern Mediterranean, the Greek alphabet makes something possible that had been lost for generations. Memory becomes permanent. Laws can be written, and power begins to shift. From memory to system, stories can be preserved. And the poems of Homer, once carried only by voice, begin to take form in words. Homer does not record history. He preserves a memory of greatness, a world already gone. A lost world begins to come back into focus. Still not in stone, still not in monuments, yet. But the clearest evidence of this reconstruction is not a temple, not even a monument. It's the humble craft of pottery, found in cemeteries outside Athens. These were not rare objects, they were part of everyday life, used, handled, seen. Some of the vessels stand over 5 feet tall, as large as the people they commemorate. Large, carefully made, covered in pattern. At first glance, it may seem simple, but this is where Greek art begins again. Art historians call this the geometric period, a world defined by pattern, repetition, and control. These vessels are covered in repeating designs, lines, triangles, zigzags, and one motif appears again and again: the meander. A line that turns and turns and turns again, endlessly. It has no clear beginning, no clear end. The Greeks named it after a river, one that twists and winds without stopping, like time itself, like memory moving forward, its order sustained. This is not decoration, this is a way of thinking. After generations of instability, Greek artists are not trying to capture the world as it looks. They are trying to control it, to impose structure, to create predictability, to rebuild meaning. Pattern becomes a way of restoring balance and control, a shared visual language across the Greek world. And then something else appears: the human figure, but not as we might expect. These figures are not naturalistic. They are not individualized. They are not portraits. They are ideas reduced to form, highly stylized rather than directly observed. Triangles for torsos, lines for limbs. Human beings, reintroduced into a world still finding its shape. On large funerary vessels called craters, wide-mouthed vessels used for mixing wine and water, we begin to see scenes emerge. One of the most famous examples is the Dipylon Krater. A figure lies at the center, the deceased, surrounded by mourners, their arms raised to their heads, a gesture of grief still recognizable today. Their bodies repeat in rhythm, arranged in horizontal bands or registers. Grief becomes pattern. Even death is brought into order. The larger the vessel, the greater the status of the dead. Even in death, hierarchy remains. These vessels stood over graves. Some were open at the base, so offerings could pass through from the living to the dead. Art is not separate from life. It's part of ritual, part of memory, part of mourning. For the first time since the collapse, we begin to see something more. Narrative. Scenes unfold across the surface, not yet fluid, not yet natural, but present. A story begins to emerge. These images exist alongside the stories that are being told again, of heroes, of war, of a world greater than the one they inhabit. The same world remembered by Homer. But now, those memories begin to take visual form. As trade expands, Greek artists encounter new ideas. From Egypt in North Africa, from Mesopotamia in the Near East, and from Phoenician cities along the eastern Mediterranean coast. For the first time since a collapse, Greece is no longer isolated. It's connected to a wider world. Ideas begin to travel, and Greek art begins to change. This phase is often called the Orientalizing period, as Greek artists absorb influences from these cultures. New forms appear: composite creatures, sphinx-like figures, hybrid animals. The world grows larger, and Greek art begins to absorb it. Order has returned, but it's still abstract. The next step will make it human. The Greeks will not stop at pattern. They will not stop at symbol. They will turn to the human body itself, not just as a figure, but as a system, a structure, a measure of order. From lines to patterns to the first fragile images of human life, Greek art begins again, not with perfection, not with realism, but with something more fundamental: the need to bring order to a broken world. Not yet the Greece of marble statues and perfect bodies, but the beginning of the idea that will create them. This is where the answer begins to take form.